So I'm not going to read what's on the PowerPoint, but to just sum up the purpose of our project, we were very interested in the way that Filipino Americans in the 209, meaning for those who are not from here, 209 is the area code of San Joaquin County. We were very interested in the ways that Filipino Americans define and view mental health, right? So we were interested in really understanding what influences people's beliefs or notions around mental health. What are the norms in your own families, right? What was it like growing up? Did you talk about mental health? And so we basically conducted, and this is one of the amazing things, we're still coming out of the pandemic, so all the interviews were conducted over Zoom. So I conducted 31 interviews with people residing here in the county, and the average age of the 31 participants was about 40 years old, and predominantly female, like 18, which is a conversation in itself. That when we talk about mental health or don't talk about mental health, it is also very gendered, meaning the way boys and men talk about it is very different than the way girls and women talk about it, right? And if you can just reflect back on your own families and what that was like. So not only is mental health very gendered, but there's also generational gaps. So the idea here is to bridge those gaps, right? So just wanted to add in terms of what Abby so beautifully described in the way we view mental health and what the research says. There's so many different explanations and what we refer to as sociocultural factors, basically social explanations, cultural explanations around mental health and health disparities. And so, again, the idea was, how can we better normalize talking about mental health, not making it so shameful, so taboo, right? Just think about it. Why don't we talk about it more openly? And there's various reasons for that. And what is particularly, I think, it's not unusual, but what we found in terms of the findings from our data is that it really does match what the existing research already says, right? And so next slide, please. So I'm going to highlight three main findings because I want time for our speakers. We have an amazing group of panelists coming up after. So I'll highlight only three main findings here. Being that we are in a church, right, and this has actually historical significance, I learned that this church is where the manongs and manangs, meaning the older Filipinos and Filipinas, right? This is the church that they first went to. There's actually a signage out front. What does it say? There's a signage out front. It's okay. Thank you, Pastor. Yes, and also thanking the pastor for allowing us to use this space. Thank you so much. And so faith and religion play an integral role in the way Filipinos view mental health, right? And so from our findings, what we found is that, and it's varied based on generation. So I interviewed, like I said, the average age was 40. The range was, I interviewed folks from one was 19 years old up until 93. The oldest was a 93-year-old person. And so what we found is that oftentimes participants were almost forced to choose between faith and religion versus seeking help, whether that help about their mental health and wellness was formal ways, meaning therapists, counselors, or informal ways, talking to someone, right? So it was an either or, when in fact, some of the younger participants that we interviewed said it shouldn't be a choice between faith and religion or seeking help. It should be faith and religion and seeking help, right? This minor word, really. And so what we found also was that some of the younger Filipinos I interviewed said, when I was growing up and experiencing depression or clinical anxiety, my parent or parents would just tell me to pray it away. You need to just pray it away. You need to just go to church. You need, right? It's this, like relying solely. There's nothing wrong with the religion. I am a person of faith, and I'm happy and I'm proud to say that, but it shouldn't be a choice between our faith and religion or seeking help. And so some participants mentioned that oh, I should just pray harder, go to church and talk to God, right? And it wasn't that the parents were not well-meaning. Think about the generation that they grew up in. Your parents, now we're talking people, the parents are in their 50s, right, and 60s, and then think about even the older Filipinos that were participating. And so it was more about, not viewing mental health. In some cases, you talked about severe mental illness, right? There's severe mental illness and severe mental disorders. Those are actually chronic diseases. So equating mental health with physical health is the point that you were trying to make. Next slide, please. The second point is that as Filipinos, there are specific cultural notions about health, mental health in particular. And so these are phrases that were brought up by many of the participants, and I will translate them for you. So hiya is what it translates to is shame. The actual full word is nakakahiya. So what that means is, like, if someone is experiencing, it doesn't have to be about mental health. Let's say you dropped out of school, okay, or think about the things that bring shame. Maybe someone is having an affair. The idea is, let's not talk about it. Nakakahiya naman. Don't say anything. Keep it quiet. Very secretive, right? And so this theme of shame came up repeatedly in the interviews. A second one is bahala na. And what that means is whatever. So it can be interpreted in different ways. It can be interpreted as whatever will happen, but it can also refer to having this determination. So let me give you an example. So let's say you're going through some difficult time in your life. Okay, let's say you haven't been able to find a job. So the idea here is like, bahala na, I'm not going to worry about it. Whatever happens, happens. So it's leaving it up to it's sort of like not taking, kind of leaving it up to the universe is what I like to say. So we saw that quite a bit in the results. The other one is an interesting one. Kawawa ka means poor you. It's like, oh, poor you, you're going through that. Kawawa ka naman. Why are you crying or whatever. Kawawa ka. It's like, oh, poor you. But it's not meant in a positive way, right? Usually it's like, what are you complaining about? You know what kind of hardships we went through? So whatever problems you're experiencing, they don't compare to the challenges and difficulties that we experience. I'm talking about generational differences. And a few more points is, and Abby already talked about stigma, still a lot of stigma around mental health. But the shame piece is huge. Shh, keep it quiet. Let's not talk about it, right? Your kid is going to therapy? Well, what's wrong with them? And that translates to the parents. So some of the parents I interviewed felt this sense of guilt, this parental guilt. What did I do wrong, right? Taking it personally rather than acknowledging my child is going through a rough time. What can I do? It sounds so simple. What can I do to help? It's interesting that when we have loved ones, let's say a friend going through a hard time, it's so much easier to say, hey John, what's going on? Let's go out. Let me take you out for a cup of coffee. It's easier because we're friends, right? But let's say John was my son. It's a little bit harder. The dynamics start to shift. So what we're trying to do again is to really break down the barriers, to make it okay to say, hey John, you look like you're kind of bummed out. What's going on? See, it's not so formal. Sorry to pick on John, but he seems like a nice guy, and I met him, so it's all good. And the last point is, in terms of intergenerational differences, what I want to emphasize here is that, yes, there are generational gaps, in terms of the grandparents that I interviewed, the parents, and the adult children. Yes, there are generational gaps in the way we view mental health and well-being. But I'm a hopeful person, and my family can attest to that. I just try to really, look at things from a positive point of view, because otherwise I think I'd be very miserable, because I'm a sociologist, right? And I can just pick so many social issues, social problems in this world. But I do believe that, there are bridges that can be built to really to really promote health, right? And we can use health broadly, our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health. And so what we found in terms of the results from our study is, again, you know, if you think about your grandparents and your parents, can you imagine leaving your home country for a foreign country, right? Foreign lands, come to the United States, leave everything you know behind. Just imagine what's going on mentally, emotionally, physically. Just imagine now if you had to suddenly leave the US and go to a different country. What would that be like for you? How will that impact your mental health and well-being? And so, yes, we have different histories in terms of our migration histories, in terms of where we grew up. Some of us were born here, some of us were not. And so regardless of these dynamics, not just the parent-child dynamics, but looking at things from a gendered perspective, I think it's really important, that's why we're here together, and I'll end here, to bridge those gaps. Because if you just think about your own families, or even beyond your families, the people that you care about, you want them to be, their overall health and well-being. You want that to be good, right? I don't think any of us in here want to be in a space where it's unhealthy, right? So I hope that you bring your voices and yourselves to the breakout sessions, and we're really looking forward to the panel, so thank you.